I love you, Pumpkin.
I love you, honey bunny.
Everybody be cool, this is a robbery!
Any of you fucking pricks move! And I'll execute every motherfucking last one of you!
Hello and welcome to Movies and Tea. This is our second episode of our Quentin Tarantino season, and tonight we are obviously looking at his now legendary cult favourite, Pulp Fiction. I'm your host as always, Elwood Jones, and joining me of course is my co-host, the one and only Miss Kim Lowe.
Hello.
And tonight, as I said, we are talking about Pulp Fiction, the film which really broke Tarantino out into the mainstream and has now become it's gained such a place in pop culture. I think that many people know about Pulp Fiction without perhaps even seeing the film. It's become up there with the likes of Stepford Wives. It's just sort of like there's certain scenes are in this film that they've been so parodied and referenced or done to hell in every other sort of format that it's now got this sort of name recognition that you kind of know what it is before you've even seen it. So, Kim, I mean, with Pulp Fiction, is this one you've seen before, or is it first time watch? Or
I've definitely seen Pulp Fiction before, but I saw it a long time ago, and I might have had like a rewatch a decent many years ago also. So I remember a part of it, and I don't remember a lot of it because, I mean, it all goes back to the fact that, you know, Tarantino is not really my favorite director, and it's kind of like a love-hate relationship that I've had. But Pulp Fiction, you know, definitely merits a rewatch in many ways.
I think Pulp Fiction's the film that I've seen the most times out of his whole filmography, and I think it was also the one which in many ways really sort of cemented the obsession with Tarantino and his films. I think it was between this and Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs, I think, because of its just intense tone and real sort of indie sort of limitations, I think was a little harder to get into, even though there are so many great moments within that film. But with Pulp Fiction, I think it was the one where everything finally sort of came together, and Tarantino was like officially announced as this new exciting voice in cinema. I mean, he won the top prize at the Cannes Film Festival, which that year was being headed up by one of his favourite actors, Clint Eastwood. And Tarantino is thinks that The Good, the Bad, the Ugly is like one of his all-time favourite films. And while he was being given the prize, there was a woman who at the back started shouting scandal and protest in French, and he responded by flipping her the middle finger on both hands. So it really sort of only added to Tarantino's reputation as the infant terrible of independent cinema, and certainly from Pulp Fiction, I mean, his career only sort of continued to skyrocket, which is really kind of interesting when you look back at Reservoir Dogs, which was considered a flop in the States, but went over to Europe and the UK especially, and we just absolutely adored it, and it came back to the States as like, wow, this movie's like big in Europe, whereas before it had been seen as this little like art house movie. So it never really got the sort of traction it needed, and it just came back as this huge cult hit. You had people working it into like their stand-up sets, and you would have like midnight showings with everyone turning up in like the suits and squirt guns. It was just a really fun time, and with Pulp Fiction it was sort of like taking what he'd done with Reservoir Dogs and just kicking it up to that next level. As here we got to see the introduction of many of his regular players within the Tarantino cast, and it was the first film that really got the distribution through Miramax, obviously, with Weinstein being a kind of father figure to Tarantino in many ways, which would only make his outing as part of the Me Too movement all the more sort of throw him into kind of a tailspin, which we'd obviously cover later in the season. But with Pulp Fiction, I mean, we open really with another diner conversation. I mean, Reservoir Dogs opens with a diner, and here Pulp Fiction opens with a diner, and as we'll soon learn, we're actually opening at the end of the film, and if you look in the background, you can actually see Vincent, John Travolta's character, go off to the bathroom, as we obviously see him do at the end of the film. So it's nice the fact that this shot is still very much connected to the end of the film, but it's here that we're introduced to Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, who are a couple who are also running a ring of robberies on diners, rather than and it's this opening conversation, much like the Madonna's Like a Virgin, what that's actually about. Here we have two crooks talking about the world of hold-ups, I guess is the term, really. So I mean, that opening conversation,
I mean, the opening conversation is very fun. I think, like, it really sets the tone of the entire movie, and I mean, it's part of kind of why Tarantino is the way, you know, you have this. I mean, Pulp Fiction is a really long movie. Let's put it that way. I never realized it was that long. And you start off in this really high octane type of conversation where it's just kind of really quick dialogue, and it's kind of a staple at this point as you watch more of these Tarantino movies, I think, of seeing this. And the conversation is interesting because they start talking about when you hold up the dangers of robbing and burglary, pretty much, with when you're talking about banks and liquor stores, and then they talk about why robbing restaurants and diners are easier, and coffee shops and all that sort of thing. And it's this really fascinating conversation between these two, and as you see them kind of follow through pretty much with what they want to do, and then they're just like, okay, yeah, let's do this now, type of thing.
Oh yeah, it's just absolutely fantastic. You've got this couple who could just be having a conversation about anything, and they're just like a couple that are in love, but they just happen to be also stick-up merchants at the same time. And the way that they interact back and forth, they make fun of each other, especially with Amanda Plummer's Honey Bunny. The fact that she just constantly like makes fun of Tim Roth's Pumpkin, and just like the way that he's getting so fired up and giving this whole long rant about, you know, about the art of the stick up, really, about the saying that, you know, there's this guy who went and held up a bank using a phone. He's like, you try doing that in a liquor store, and you're more likely to end up having your head blown off. So it's just just like how you look at like how she like looks so lovingly at him as she's talking, and he's there just like banging coffee cups and yelling at the waiter and stuff, and you think, well, how are these two people sort of matched together? And then we get to the end scene, and it's sort of like that. And if you motherfuckers move, and I execute every last one of you. And he's like, oh, now I see it. And then we're obviously straight into Dick Dale's Mr. Lou, and it's sort of like Tarantino's just throwing down the gauntlet and just like announcing, it's like, here we are, this is the movie you've come to see. And it does how we're able to just change, just like on a dime. Whereas Reservoir Dogs sort of eases into it, the fact that we leave the diner and then we have the credits, and then we're thrown into Tim Roth bloodied and sprawled out in the back of a car and screaming at Harvey Keitel. At least with Pulp Fiction, it doesn't really give you that sort of comfort. You're just sort of like, straight away you're in the movie, you hit the ground and you're running, you're just going straight with it. And then I love how the soundtrack as well, in the opening, it changed with Miss Lou, and we hear like the stereo speaking, and it's like, oh, we're into our next story, which is obviously about Vincent and Jules, the two hitmen who are being sent to retrieve the briefcase, which I think is now probably like one of the most parodied scenes in pop culture.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think about Pulp Fiction, I think all the characters are really the stars of the show, and that definitely has to go to, you know, the John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson being in this one, where you have, and the whole, how it all started with, you know, what's in the suitcase, and the briefcase, and no one knows what's in the briefcase ever, but you just kind of follow this briefcase around.
Yeah.
And it kind of becomes a staple of your scenes, which pulls all these characters together in the different stories that we end up seeing and the characters and whatnot. And in many ways, I can see why Pulp Fiction is more regarded than Reservoir Dogs. For me, I think just by the length alone, I kind of think Reservoir Dogs is a bit stronger for me, and a watch that I would definitely go back, like something I would watch again. Whereas Pulp Fiction, it's a different type of story. To me, everybody feels so comic. Like, it's almost like I'm watching a comic strip. The whole story, and it's just like a fragmented comic strip. So you're jumping from one scene and then the next scene, and it's all in chapters. It almost feels like it's in chapters. So it follows this path, which is all scrambled, but when you get to a turning point, you kind of see where, okay, now we know that this scene is definitely supposed to, like, now we know that the storyline is definitely fragmented.
Yeah, I mean, with both this and Pulp Fiction, where the storyline, it's non, traditional sort of storyline, and yet when we look at books, we often have books which start off in the middle and then go back to the start, and it's no big deal, and it's sort of like, well, why can't we do that with films? And this is what Tarantino basically says with these two films. Both he just tells them this real non-traditional sort of storyline. I mean, we go back and forth through the plot line. So we start with our first story about them going to get this briefcase, and when we eventually we come back to the end of that story in the final sort of act, and it becomes this new slant that we're now looking at these characters from, with the story of the Go Watch obviously being inserted in between that, as well as the boss asking Vincent to take his wife out to dinner because he's out of town, so he wants him to take her out to dinner so that she doesn't get bored. But at the same time, we've been built up in this sort of like first story where we got these two gangsters, but again, they're not talking about gangster things, same as we saw with Reservoir Dogs. They're just talking about general day-to-day observations, in particular the Royale with cheese discussion, which really comes out of the fact that with the success of Reservoir Dogs, Tarantino had gone off onto the European festival circuit. He'd took some time out in Amsterdam to write Pulp Fiction, and it really now feels that he's coming back with a more world view. He's like picked up all these sort of like European idiosyncrasies that he now works in as these like nerdy little observations. But obviously in the hands of Tarantino, they're just like witty, quotable dialogue now. I mean, I think we all know what a quarter pounder with cheese is called in France now, don't we? So we also know what Hunger Games is known as in France as well.
Okay.
Battle Royale with cheese. The chemistry between John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson, I mean, this is a real revival sort of career piece for John Travolta, whose career hadn't really been doing a lot for many years at this point. But he's has his career like just given a complete shot in the arm by being in this film, and he, as I said, he's just like comes back and he's like this hip guy, which I have to say he's not managed to reattain since. But played off against Samuel Jackson, just the way these two are talking, the fact they're talking about the fact that their boss has potentially thrown some guy out of a window because he gave his wife a foot massage, which is real great foreshadowing the fact that Vincent has to take her on a dinner date. The fact is, like, you don't want to, like, what happens if you don't you don't make the boss happy? It might also be happening to you. And these little scraps as well, they're taken from other bits of screenplays that he'd done previously. It was in another script that he'd done some script doctoring for, that an uncomfortable foot massage was brought up, but it was never actually used, and that's why it ended up being worked into this screenplay, the same way that we see Itching Powder being mistaken for cocaine in his first film, My Best Friend's Birthday, is reworked into heroin being mistaken for cocaine in the dinner date story.
Right.
But obviously with this sort of bag collection, I mean, do you think this scene even has the same sort of power now? I mean, now that we've seen it done so many different ways and parodied in so many ways, especially.
I don't think it's comparable, right? Because it's kind of OG. You have this and plus you have no one can really replace Samuel L. Jackson in any type of exchange. And I think that goes for a lot of the conversations here. I think it's when you think about it, when I look at it, Tarantino is really a master when it comes to these script writing things and these dialogues, where I think a lot of directors that we've looked at is more about atmosphere and grabbing a different type of visual element. Tarantino is he's not just this, for me at least. I've always known him as this blood squirting, exaggerated violence, over the top violence type of person. But as I'm looking through, the first two movies that we've gone through right now, Pulp Fiction especially, you really, with the dialogue that he has, it's so on point. And this dialogue the whole time never seems to be really about the situation. It's always this really, beating around the bush type of conversation even. Especially when they're in the place and they're encountering these people who, when they're going to retrieve the briefcase, and you just have this conversation of, just people going around talking about, who this, what does Mr. Wallace look like, and blah blah blah, and you keep going on, and it just goes on this. It just goes. You can't replace him, mostly because Samuel L. Jackson is such a fantastic actor, and when you have that close up of his face and his expression, and it just feels so intense, right? The conversation itself doesn't feel as intense when it starts, but as he's going further down, you build up to that moment where he's just you're just waiting for him to shoot this guy. You're just it's gonna happen now, it's gonna happen now, and then you just keep waiting and waiting, and it doesn't really. And then when it does, it kind of shocks you because you've already built that tension up to a certain level, right?
Definitely so. And with Tarantino, with Samuel Jackson's performance in that particular scene, he just takes us on such a ride. I mean, when he's introduced, he's just like there. He's like killing them with kindness. He's just completely non-threatening. He just goes in. He's like spends more time talking about what they're eating, and it's sort of like, oh, you're eating cheeseburgers, and we had the introduction of Big Kahuna Burger, which is one of Tarantino's fake brands that he has, along with Red Apple cigarettes that appear throughout his films. And again, he has that whole conversation where he's sort of like, how he can't have cheeseburgers anymore because his girlfriend's vegetarian, and by proxy he's also vegetarian. And he's just there eating this guy's breakfast, drinks his soda, and when he drinks that soda, you just waiting for it to see if he blinks, and he doesn't. He just fixes him with this transfixed stare. And any other sort of film we look at where you're looking at characters trying to intimidate another, especially in these sort of gangster ones, they'll be like, effing and blind, and there'll be like this real threat of violence. But with the way Vincent is carrying himself Jules is carrying himself in the room, he's still completely in control. And it's really once there's a point where one of the guys tries to get a little too overly familiar, and he just like shuts him down straight away. He's like, no, your ass ain't talking your way out of this one. And then as you said already, he goes into the whole what does Marcellus Wallace look like speech, and before we obviously build into the Ezekiel 25:17, the path of the righteous man is bisected on both sides by the tyrannies of evil men. Which I know people, when this film came out, there was people that who just like read the Bible trying to find the quote because they couldn't remember the exact number, so they were like flicking through Bibles trying to find the quote. But But even this like throwaway catchphrase comes back at the end of like Jules like re-examines it, and we have some deeper meaning. There is no wasted dialogue. There's no filler in this. It's such a tight script that Tarantino is working with in this film. And even when we have the approach to The Room, it's the only time they actually talk about doing anything remotely gangster-like. It's when we have the trunk shot, and they're like, "Oh, how many guys are up there?" And he's like, 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6. It's like, we should have fucking shotguns for this. And that's the only time. The rest of the time is like just back to this foot massage that this guy gave Marcellus Wallace's wife that he apparently took such great offense to. And then we obviously end in this moment of violence with the flashes of light. I mean, do you even like care what's in the briefcase?
Not really. It doesn't really matter. I mean, that's the thing. I don't think the movie was actually about that, right? It's just a way to give bring all these characters together as they move from one location to the next, and obviously it does show a change in time when you it kind of jumps between scenes in that sense, because after this one we get into the bar or club or whatever, and then you see these two guys walk in these hilarious t-shirt and shorts.
That's true. I forgot that they're we get the very final shot of that story at the end in that middle portion, don't we? So
yeah. And then you're just thinking, well, when did they do that? Is it because of the shot that because of all the shooting that went down in that one, right? Because at this point you still don't know that the movie is kind of a jumbled kind of storyline. It's only when you get sequence later on that you notice where this is coming from.
Definitely so. I mean, obviously the briefcase is a reference to Kiss Me Deadly, which also had its own mysterious briefcase. That one containing plutonium. But it, same as Tarantino's briefcase, you just saw the characters open it and this light emitting. We also saw it in Repo Man with the Camaro with the glowing trunk that caused people just to be reduced to smoking boots. So we've had like mysterious objects of desire in other films before. I mean, Ronin again has a box that everybody's so keen to get hold of, but nobody ever finds out what's in it. So it's just, I understand the MacGuffin, and it's just funny just seeing like how many people just like spend years like arguing over what it is, whether it's like gold or drugs or Marcellus Wallace's soul. Because we obviously, when we're introduced to him, we see him from behind, and I think it's when you got someone like Ving Rhames, who's just a big stocky guy and bold, and you see him from behind with this little plaster on the back of his neck. It's just, the fan theories just love to go wild with it. So. But yeah, I mean, obviously from there we go into our second story, the Gold Watch, where we're obviously introduced to Marcellus Wallace talking to Butch, here played by Bruce Willis, another career revival moment there. And while it's going on, we've got Al Green's Let's Stay Together, which is just provides this real sort of hypnotic tone as he's outlining this plan of how Butch is going to take this dive in this prize fight, which obviously he doesn't, as we find out later, as he accidentally kills the other boxer and finds himself on the run because Marcellus Wallace is going to send his hitmen after him. And he's got to retrieve a gold watch that his girlfriend failed to pick up at their apartment. So
that girlfriend, though.
You not a fan?
She's I don't know. I'm on the fence on how I feel about her right now.
Okay.
I'm on the fence. Like, there are moments like when she's just having those really innocent moments that you almost feel like she's so protected and so sweet, I guess.
Okay.
But at the same time, she could be really annoying because it feels like, oh, suddenly he yells at her and then she starts bawling her eyes out or something into these like huge emotional changes, which feels so ridiculous at times, right? Because I don't know how long she's been with this butch fellow, but but I mean, you should know his temper at that point, because at the same time, he's like, Butch is a character, which is also, Bruce Willis does a really good job at having that sudden change in emotion as well, where he just gets really angry and then suddenly he'll be like, okay, no, it's my fault. I should have done this. I should have been clear about how important this watch was to me. And then and then you move to the next scene as he's going, and he's driving away, and he's just like, he's swearing and all that stuff.
Yeah, because I love the fact that when it comes to like outlining the importance of the watch, rather than having Butch tell us about the importance of this watch, he has this flashback to himself watching TV as a child. I think he was watching Cargo Landing, some awfully cheap show. And the shot of the child sitting in front of the TV, Steve Buscemi highlighted and said, that's just young Quentin right there. And I mean, Quentin himself admits he was being an only child, he spent a great deal of time just watching TV and movies and by himself, and that was like his friend. So it makes no surprise really that we see that the young Butch there doing the same thing, and we get the wonderful appearance by Christopher Walken, which I think a lot of people forget is in this movie. But yeah, he tells the history of this gold watch that belonged to his father, had been passed down the family line, and his father had been killed in Vietnam, had passed it on to Christopher Walken's character to smuggle back in his ass. So you really hope he washed it first. And now he's passed it back on to Butch so that he can have his namesake watch that's provided him been with his these father figures throughout for several generations now, and it obviously holds his great sentimentality to Butch, so much the fact that he's willing to risk his life to go across town to retrieve it. But even before this, I mean, we have him escaping from the scene of his crime, so to speak, when he's in the back of the taxi with the very exotic cab driver, where they're talking about names, and he's like, I'm American names don't mean shit. I was surprised nothing happened with the cab driver,
because at this point so much stuff was happening, right?
she's so surprisingly flirty.
Okay.
And the fact that she just like everything's in like such a seductive tone, which I think is a lot to do with accents as well. But yeah, there's just something about that. I constantly go back to that cab scene, which they're just having a conversation about names. I mean, she's played by Angela Jones, who is actually an American actress, despite the accent, and she was in Curdled, which was in '91, which was released on Tarantino's Rolling Thunder Pictures. So it's surprising that she didn't actually appear more, because she's got such a air of glamour to her. I was really surprised she didn't really appear in more. So
okay, I completely yeah. Now that you talk about it, I didn't really pay too much attention to that scene, so it was. I guess you're right. I mean, I did expect I was kind of expecting in the back of my mind that something would happen, but at the same time, I think it really crafts Butch's character, because it doesn't happen, that he's really this simple-minded type of person, I guess.
Yeah.
He's very kind of one-track minded. He's thinking about, at one point, just escaping, and then when something is more important than the current plan, like getting back the watch, that's his main thing. So he'll go straight for it.
Oh yeah, when he obviously like meets up with his girlfriend in the motel, I mean, he's so sure that his plan has worked. Everything's going according to plan. The fact that he's going to hide out in the hotel room for the night, engage in cunnilingus with his girlfriend, and go for breakfast, and it's like only then he dawns on him that the one thing that he needed wasn't there. Which obviously puts him on this perilous cross town journey, where he's going to not only have to deal with a hitman in his bathroom, the now ill-fated Vincent, who I I just love the fact that his whole death is sort of set up. I mean, he comes into his apartment, he finds a machine gun on the counter. So obviously Vincent's using his bathroom, and he's making himself like Pop-Tarts, and the fact that the Pop-Tarts coming out the toaster like time perfectly with Vincent coming out the bathroom. So
I just find it hilarious because every single scene, it seems like there's some kind of bathroom moment.
There's a lot of bathroom play in this.
There is a lot of bathroom moments, and a lot of it is John Travolta in a bathroom. So it's just really funny when you're thinking about it, and it just makes sense for him to be dying in the bathroom because he spent so much time in there.
Yeah. And then he's like, I mean, he's so sure. He's like, he survived the hitman. Nothing bad is going to happen to me. He's there, singing along to Stack the Bros Flowers on the Wall, and he's just there. And of course, who does he see crossing the road but Marcellus Wallace with the great "what the fuck" moment. And this obviously leads to the two then having a cross-town brawl, very similar to The Quiet Man in many ways. And we get our trademark comedian cameo with Kathy Griffin as the bystander who's telling Marcellus Wallace that she's more than happy to be a witness for him. But yeah, we obviously then stumble into the gun shop, which leads us into a whole other heap of trouble for our pair, as they find themselves soon chained up in the basement with the Gimp and the corrupt cop with evil intentions. There's something about the Gimp scene that just still amuses me now. I don't know what it is. It makes no sense. It's like, why have we got this whole dungeon set up with some guy in a box that we're going to wheel out for this spontaneous sodomizing session that we're going to have?
I don't know. Honestly, don't.
Interestingly, though, that scene was originally going to be soundtracked to My Corona, but the band, one of the lead singers had become a born-again Christian and really kind of frowned on the idea of their song being screwed up by Tarantino, because he had seen what happened to Steelers Wheel, stuck in the middle with Reservoir Dogs. I don't think he was too keen for his song to be screwed up with a sodomization scene. So obviously Butch manages to escape the fact that he has this honorable moment where he goes back for Marcellus, but before then we see him like going through the weapons, and when you look at it, and he's like, all the weapons like different film characters. Like he's there with like the chainsaw. Is he gonna be like Leatherface? And then it's like finally gets to like the samurai sword. It's like, the weapon of honor, and it's he's gonna be Hanzo, or he's gonna be like the Lone Wolf from the Lone Wolf and Cub series. And even when he like does the attacks, it's shot completely like a pop samurai movie. Just the way that we've got when the guy gets slashed across the frontier sword, like the aye with the hands up in the air. It's very pop samurai, and Tarantino even like showed them like scenes from like Shadow Warriors with Sonny Chiba just saying like, this is how this is how we want this to be shot. But the scene itself, there's another fun parody as well. If you watch All American Girl with Margaret Cho, they did a whole episode with her then boyfriend Tarantino, where they just basically parody Pulp Fiction, and they redid the weapons using scene with the Asian grandma, and she's like going for all the different weapons, and in the end the samurai sword is replaced with a hedge trimmer.
That'll be interesting to look up.
So yeah, you can find the whole of All American Girl on YouTube. So it's kind of weird just seeing like Margaret Cho and her ex-boyfriend there, just like seeing how many references to Pulp Fiction they can cram into one episode. So yeah, I mean, Bruce's, Butch's struggle though, just the way it escalates. I mean, how did this sort of play for yourself, Kim? I mean, obviously it's a story that only gets more ludicrous, and it starts off so simple, just like one guy wanting to get his watch back.
Yeah, but isn't that how it always ends up, right? these type of stories are always based on this one kind of ridiculous story, and you chase after something, and everything goes wrong. Pretty much Murphy's Law happens, and you just watch this guy. All he wants is one thing, and then you're just kind of thinking about just how he's going to get out of all of this, right?
Yeah.
Because, I don't know what to say. I mean, it almost feels like, I honestly don't really have much of, I think that the Butch story is really random.
Yeah.
It's the least immersion that I feel.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's always
because it seems to really come out of nowhere. But it is really good filler in kind of setting that storyline, of pulling together the storyline for Jules and Vincent's story. So for me, it has that kind of point, but at the same time, it also brings, you finally get to see Marcellus Wallace, because he encounters him. And that scene is definitely very hilarious as it gets really just ridiculous. When, it's like he tries to hit him and then the car goes somewhere else and then he's scrambling out and this whole thing happens type of deal.
Oh, and when he even uses Marcellus's little pep talk against him, and he's punching him in the face. He's like, "You feel that, boy? That's pride fucking with you." So you can. It just how brings it back, because obviously you think that you don't know what Butch is thinking the whole time that Marcellus Wallace is outlining the plan to him, and then you just realize the whole time that he just thought Marcellus Wallace was kind of an ass. And he actually had no respect for him at all, and he was always going to do his own thing.
Yeah, because his plan was to escape the whole time. He wanted to leave this and just go live at large with his girl, type of thing.
Yeah.
And that was his plan the whole time. So he was okay with it, because in his mind, you kind of have that moment when he's having that flashback, whether it was because of it was because of that he didn't he kind of ran off from the fight. But in reality, I wonder if it was because, we have that flashback and then he wakes up right before the fight. And then we see that he leaves. So I wonder if there was an actual change of heart. But then when he goes to the motel and he sees his girlfriend, that's when you know that, okay, well, this was his plan the entire time. It had nothing to do with... It might have had something to do with his dad and pride and all that stuff about about the whole conversation that he remembers from getting that watch. That whole scene kind of links together, and that I think that's the most important. I think that it's more of an entertainment level and kind of something that kind of pulls the story together and introduces a little kind of like a little bit of a, I don't know what you call it. It's like a glue to the story.
Yeah.
But if you say oh, am I really? I think Bruce Willis does a great job, but does his story really give me a lot of wow moments? I mean, honestly, I don't remember a part of it. But if you're talking about, the other definitely memorable moments is kind of when we have more of the conversation, say, in the diner, in the Jackrabbit Slim, with Mia and Vincent. I actually think that conversation was really entertaining.
Yeah, because unfortunately, me screwing up the timeline for this film, we've completely skipped over the dinner date, which we'll come to in a moment. But I think it's when it came to the Butch's storyline that it first dawned on me. It's oh, this is completely out of sequence, because it kind of comes out of nowhere. This random story. It's well, what the hell are you doing here? This is not the characters we've been following, because up until this point we've had Vincent and Jules, and then we obviously follow Vincent as he goes on the date with Mia, and it's those things all go together, and then randomly it's now we're following this box, and it's what's this got to do with anything? And I know the first time I saw it just completely threw me off. And
but but the thing though, sorry to interrupt you, but I mean the thing is that the Butch's story is what helps you realize that the story is kind of fragmented, because first we see him in the bar, and then after that we see him afterwards in getting ready for the fight, right? And then all of this kind of links together after. I can't remember if it was this scene or the one where, I think it was the one that we see the guy in the bathroom. We see the guy in the bathroom in the where they're trying to get back the briefcase. And then that's when you realize that the scene is the whole story.
It's funny you obviously mentioned about the bathroom though, because I mean, it's only when we're in the conversation I realised how many bathroom shots there are in this movie. We obviously have Vincent on the bathroom. We have the guy in the bathroom.
We have Vincent in the bathroom again.
Yes, he's in the bathroom twice, isn't he? He's has a lot of fibre. And we also see Mia in the bathroom as well at Jack Rabbit Slim. So quite a lot of bathroom shots. And I suppose in the later films these are just replaced with feet shots. So well,
I mean, we had a feet shot in this one too, right? As an introduction
that's right,
to Mia.
We do,
yeah.
Don't we? Yeah.
Yeah, our introduction to Mia was her feet, and then we see her in the car.
That's the key thing for Tarantino. That's like most other directors, they would focus on eyes or lips or bosom or something. Then no, with him is feet. That's his bag. I think it's been pretty much well documented at this point. So let's go back, because I screwed it up slightly on the timeline, to Vincent and Mia's dinner date. And for myself, I mean, this is my favourite story of the four, really, isn't it? 4. Just double counter myself. I think it's up there with the final sort of story where we get to meet Tarantino's wonderful cameo in this film. This whole story. I mean, it opens with Vincent going to buy heroin off Lance, who's his drug dealer, and we get more talk of Amsterdam, because obviously with Tarantino hanging out in Amsterdam, he's got a lot to say about Amsterdam. So, and at the same, he talks about the fact he's had his car in storage all this time, and he takes it out, and someone's gone and keyed it. And I mean, Lance himself is named after the owner of Video Archives, where Tarantino memorably worked. So it's like a fun little nod to him. And it's also where Roger Avery worked as well, who did work on the screenplay here as well, and would obviously go on to not have as much success as Tarantino is. He would go on to do Killing Zoe and Rules of Attraction, but a really great director who just really never got his due. So, but yeah, with this story, I mean, obviously the fact that he's there opening buying we have the wonderful heroin montage, which back when it was released, I mean, oh my god, they were up in arms about that. It's like, we're showing people shooting up heroin to surf music, and just going. I don't know if it's a good idea if you're going to do this all important job for your boss to turn up strung out on heroin.
I don't think any of it was supposed to be good, right? But it kind of solidifies that Vincent is really not too smart of a person, and his doom was kind of inevitable.
Yeah, it's this thing with Tarantino. I mean, most people make films about professionals, and Tarantino just like makes films about idiots.
And I mean, Vincent is a extreme idiot, because the whole time, right from the beginning, they were like, I'm just taking her out to a dinner.
Yeah.
It's not a date, it's just a dinner. And as you see this conversation and this exchange, and by the end of that dinner, you kind of really feel like during the dinner, he's really trying to keep his cool and not be too involved and kind of keep his distance. But then as you get to the whole part as they get back from this diner, and this whole thing where he's in the bathroom and he's talking to himself, like, keep your cool type of thing, and he's convincing himself that to not be involved, and then he comes out and he's like, oh, I'm just gonna leave, And then when he comes out, he realizes, obviously what's happened. And it's just like at that point, that, oh, Vincent is he likes Mia. I guess at least a little.
Well, I mean, with the character of Mia, though, I mean, hearing Uma Thurman's just like so unbelievably cool. I mean, just from like her lips over the microphone introduction, how she's got eyes on Vincent right from the moment he walks in the door. It's like, who's this cool cat who's just rolled into town with his bolo tie and questionable Euro trash haircut, and she's like has this like instant sort of connection to him, and she's not like other like gangsters moles. She's like very much in control of her own destiny. Her current lot in life is as Marcellus was his wife. Prior to this, I mean, she obviously had a pilot where she was in Fox Force 5. 5 because there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're one of my favorite lines of them. And they're just going out to dinner, and they're going to this like kitsch sort of restaurant called Jack Rabbit Slims, which, despite a number of places claiming to be the Jack Rabbit Slims, it's actually a studio set. But boy, does that look like a cool restaurant.
And I love how the conversation we have about food never stops, right? And once you get into the diner, it's a perfect situation for this. And he doesn't talk about the food so much as he talks about the $5 milkshake. How a $5 milkshake would taste.
Oh yeah, and it's the conversation is like broken up into like, just little bits of pop culture. Yeah. This whole conversation they're having, he wants to know the truth behind whether Marcellus Wallace killed someone over giving her a foot massage. And he's like, knows he can obviously ask her, but at the same time they're sort of dancing around the issue. And she's all the while being like charmed by his sort of like outlaw attitude, the fact he rolls cigarettes, and they have like this flirtatious little banter where it's she calls him like cowboy. And even like the moments where he's like the whole scene is just full of these wonderful little quips and stuff, such as like when she comes back from the bathroom and finds the food's already there, or the fact that they're criticizing the waiter and he impresses her with the fact that she mistook the waitress for being I think it's Marilyn Monroe when it's actually
Marilyn Monroe,
and it's actually Mimi Van Ross that it was, and it's like, oh, pretty smart. And it's like, yeah, my moments. And I think I've used that quote numerous times in real life, like so many moments of this film. I think it's up there with Fight Club for my most borrowed from film when I try to be smart in public. But yeah, I mean, I still have no idea. Is $5 expensive? I can never work this out or not. If this is an extravagant amount to pay for a milkshake.
Well, I mean, in today's standard, no. But, I mean, back in, the 1990s, yes, I would assume.
And it's also from the fact that Mia is established as a cokehead. So it makes perfect sense that when she discovers what Vincent's been hiding in his pocket, which is heroin, which a lot of people made the mistake of the fact that they're saying that, oh yeah, it's 'cause you can't snort heroin, but you can actually snort heroin. It's just a more traditional way of taking it is by intravenously, so by using a syringe. But you can obviously snort heroin, as any good drugs education class will tell you. So she has the overdose, which of course is not the best thing for you to like kill your boss's wife, even if it was inadvertently. Which obviously it's this quest. He just wants to take her out to dinner and go home and just be done with the situation. He's got his answers over the foot massage, as Mia herself says. It's like, does it sound like a reasonable thing for my husband to kill someone because he gave me a foot massage? So the fact that he's now into this conversation, and he ropes his drug dealer into the whole situation as well, which there's a wonderful cutaway where he's like on the phone, and you just hear like Vincent like crashing through his yard, and we follow him with like the handheld cam. We follow Vincent of Paul Lance's wife, outplayed by Plumwood by Rosanna Arquette. And we just see Vincent dragging her out the car and then just like dropping her on the lawn, which just still makes me laugh now. So,
oh, that scene was just ridiculous. You know, it's just all kinds of craziness, and then you have this whole moment, and I think that part was where the camera almost feels like it's fixed, and it just shifts from one side of the room to the next as you're looking at the drug dealer and the wife talking as he's looking for this guide, this handbook on how to give the injection.
Yeah, and the adrenaline shot.
And then you turn back around and then you see what's going on in the living room, and it's just the camera's frantically going back and forth a few times. And I'm just thinking, people complained about, found footage, and this almost feels like found footage type of style, where it was so like jerky in that moment, but it really reflected the panic of the characters in that moment too.
Yeah, it totally captures it, because of the whole time that we're like on the fixed camera, it's like everyone's in control of the situation, everyone's relaxed. As soon as like the shit hits the fan, then we're on the hand cam, and it makes sense that we're like going back and forth this chaotic situation. I mean, Lance's house is just full of garbage anyway, so the fact he's trying to find this medical book of how to give an adrenaline shot, and then they still have time to argue over who's going to give the shot before coming to like the reasonable, meeting point of like, if I have a chick who's ODing and bring her to your house, then I'll give her the shot. I don't know where we moments from this film when she says don't be a square but draws a rectangle. Don't understand that.
I know. we had the same conversation when we were watching this, and obviously my husband has seen this a lot more than I have, and he's a big fan of the movie, so that's something that he brought up, and he's like, well, I don't understand why they do that, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's just they just drew it. Maybe the TVs used to be square and now they're rectangle. I don't know.
Yeah, because we stretched the image out and now it looks like a rectangle. It was a square when they shot it, but it's. I think I really love this story. I think it's just so madcap, and the chemistry between Uma Thurman and John Travolta is just so great. The fact that they have the memorable dance sequence, which I think how many people copied that for their weddings.
I think you know what? Pulp Fiction is good in a lot of different ways, and it really shows Tarantino's craft as a scriptwriter and even as a director to capture all these different things, and his creativity in creating these, the big Kahuna burgers, and then you have, the red apple cigarettes, and all that comes back into play from, and then, but I think what really works here is really the uniqueness of that fragmented storyline and these really charming sort of characters, a bit ridiculous in their own way and unexpected also. I mean, even when you go to, Samuel L. Jackson's character, who suddenly he has this revelation of a different interpretation of this Ezekiel quote. And then he turns it around and he's like, okay, I don't want to do this anymore type of deal, right? And that explains in the future of why Vincent is in that bathroom getting shot by himself, where probably if he was with Jules that wouldn't have happened, because he would be like, idiot, don't leave your gun in the kitchen table,
Exactly. And I mean, this brings us into our final story where follow Vincent and Jules with the surviving member of the trio. They got the briefcase and they take Marvin with them for whatever reason. I never understood why, but soon Marvin meets the same fate as his friends when Vincent accidentally shoots him in the face, because Vincent, as we've established already, is an idiot. And they're having this whole sort of before then we have like the guy like come out of the bathroom and shoot at both Vincent and Jules, but somehow misses them, and it poses this question of like, was this fate? Is this the warning that they need to go on a different path in life, which obviously becomes Jules's main sort of takeaway from this, where Vincent's like, it was just a complete fluke. There is nothing to do with fate or anything else, and almost to like just sort of further prove this point, he, as I say, shoots Marvin in the face, which I remember laughing so loud the first time I saw that. Because my what sense of humor.
It is hilarious though, because you're looking at it and you're looking at the scene and he's pointing the gun at him and you're like, this is gonna happen. It's definitely gonna happen. It's just a matter of when. It's just a matter of when. And then when it happens, you're just like, oh my goodness, it happened. And then you have this kind of like, oh my goodness.
But when we go back to the front seat and it's like just Joseph Vincent, it's like, what happened? He's like, oh man, I shot Marvin in the face. Which obviously takes us on to Jimmy, played by Tarantino in his longest cameo to date. Here he plays the guys that he's friends with Jules, and Jules sees his house as being the best place to sort of hide out, because let's face it, their car looks like an abattoir at this point. They're both covered in blood in broad daylight. And we are also introduced to this scene to Harvey Keitel as Mr. Wolf.
Oh man. But I think that Mr. Wolf is such a fascinating character. He might have only been there for like 5 minutes or something, but
yeah.
Oh my god, that cameo was so great. And then the whole exchange with Tarantino about the whole, did you see the sign on my lawn or whatever?
Oh my god.
and then it was like, that's because it's not there.
You know why? Because it's not my business. Yeah, there's the use of the N-word. I mean, it's so difficult. I mean, we're here like as, film discussion professionals here. Probably not the best speakers of English if I'm anything to go off, but yeah, it's so hard to use the N-word in a professional context. And here Tarantino uses it with aplomb, really, and it got a lot of raised sort of eyebrows, the fact that it's used so literally. And there were many sort of different sides to it. I mean, the fact that Tarantino grew up in predominantly black neighborhoods, so all his friends were sort of like black, and it just became very immersed in black culture. And you have people like Samuel Jackson and Pam Grier who like saw it, his use of the word as not as a disparaging remark, but obviously being someone who's sort of culturally pleasant, whereas Spike Lee decided to take it that Tarantino was trying to make himself an honorary black man, which sorted a brief rivalry between the two, with Tarantino firing back. It's like, well, when's the last time anyone saw a Spike Lee movie? So yeah, I think they've they got over it now that they've both gone on to have these big careers and stuff. But certainly at the time, Tarantino's use of the N-word, much like the amount of cursing in this film. I mean, it held the Guinness World Record for the longest time for the most expletives used in one film. I think it was beaten by South Park in their episode where they just focus on the word shit. In a 30-minute episode, they just constantly use it, and they got a little counter at the bottom that totals every time it's used. So, with the general takeaway being that the more you curse and use, the more it just becomes like background noise in the end. So it loses all its power. But no, Mr. Wolf, who obviously played by Harvey Keitel, who I wish would be in more Tarantino movies. I miss Harvey Keitel and his presence. But he would actually reprise this role for a series of insurance adverts here in the UK.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he just turns up as Mr. Wolf. He's there fixing people's problems. And Kevin Bacon's also hawking mobile networks over here in the UK as well, so... It used to be the thing you went off to, Japan to, do Suntory whiskey commercials and things to, make a little extra money. And now it seems you just come over to the UK and hawk insurance and mobile contracts.
Right now, right? Right now.
Yeah, Kevin Bacon's got a whole... He's been doing this for several years now.
Okay.
Okay. And they've only just I think the last couple of years they stopped doing the Harvey Keitel ones, but he's still so cool in that role. And the fact that he comes into this situation where everything's absolute chaos, and he just knows instantly what to do. He knows how to calm us down, what they're going to do, and just really sort of takes control of the situation. And you kind of understand why Jules is so relieved when Marcel says that he's sending the cavalry, he's sending Mr. Wolf, and he's sort of like, oh, why didn't you tell me that? He's just so relieved, and then you see how Mr. Wolf works, and you're just like, oh, now I get it. Yeah, it's funny how we go from like serious sort of like the gangster movie to sort of like almost broad comedy by the end of this movie.
I mean, this is kind of like a crime romp, right? Like, it still has that kind of crime type of element to it, where a lot of it is set in the backdrop of, you know, gangsters and I don't know, robberies and all kinds of things like that. People cheating their way out of, and in every single way, they all are connected to Wallace in one way or another. But I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a romp, because, you know, you have idiots and you have, you know, single-minded people, and you have all these all these ridiculous things that are happening in the process, accidents that happen, things going wrong, and every single segment is just kind of like this ride of how many things can go wrong to one person, where you have to try and pull yourself out of this by calling in the cavalry or whatever, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting deleted scene for this when they turn up to Monster Mike's wrecking yard where they get rid of the car. Monster Mike was originally going to be played by Dick Miller, who I'm not sure if it's a name that leaps out at yourself, but he played Mr. Finkelman in the Gremlins movies. He's in a bunch. He's in like pretty much all the Joe Dante movies. He plays like odd supporting characters. He's even like in Inner Space. He plays the taxi driver, which most people don't realize he was in. But yeah, Dick Miller's like the ultimate character actor, and sadly his scenes were cut, but thankfully if you get the DVD you can watch the deleted scenes. But he has a really great exchange with Mr. Wolf, where they're just basically like going about it, sort of like he's fully aware there's a body in the car that they get rid of. So this isn't the first time that Mr. Wolf has used his wrecking yard. And he also explains how Jules and Vincent got their wonderful get-up. So they look like, as they say, they look like they're going to a volleyball game.
It's just hilarious because you're watching these two dudes at the beginning of the show and of the movie, which is just, they're in these suits, right? Serious guys who are pretty much hitmen. and then you know, you flip around and you see these guys walk around in these acting all cool and stuff in their volleyball or whatever getup. In these short shorts and and this t-shirt, these white t-shirts, and they're just walking around.
They look like they're dressed in clothes that you buy at the airport. Nowhere else like, sells really clothes that bad,
right? They're just missing that like floral button up, and then you do Hawaiian shirt, and it looked like they were tourists.
And it's randomly just like the fact that these two characters going for breakfast, they've had one hell of a morning, and they're now going for breakfast, that they find themselves caught in the middle of a stick up, which we obviously saw being carried out at the beginning with Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, as we find ourselves looped back on the back where the story starts, and we're now seeing these characters from a completely different angle, which is really interesting to see. As before they were like the enduring couple, but now they're like just the pure aggressors. We get to see them how they work, and we obviously get the inclusion of the Tarantino favorite trademark, the Mexican standoff. Only this one ends better than Reservoir Dogs did.
Yeah.
Jules, I think only Samuel Jackson's the only man who can talk his way out of a Mexican standoff.
At least according to this script, right?
I mean, he's like, I think in real life, I mean, Samuel Jackson's so cool, I think he could pull it off. It's all like, oh, when he's like, just tells him to like look at his wallet, and he's so like, oh, which one is it? It's like the one with bad motherfucker on it. There's so many like things that he says, you think he's just taunting him, but no, he's just saying what his wallet says. in a weird way, it's like the perfect ending to this film.
It is, because in the end, it almost feels like nothing's happened, right? While there's a lot that's happened, but the movie starts at one point where there's a stick-up, and then at the end, nothing really happens, because they still get to get the money that they want, and the two get to leave, right?
Yeah.
But we do know that at the end of everything, that in the middle, we also have the actual ending of what happens to, Vincent and all that stuff. But in some ways, this is a pretty... happy ending in that sense. We know that it's not happy, but then somehow there's this sense of relief when they just casually walk out of the diner after witnessing the stick up,
Yeah, it's so like, yeah, as you said, it's just the fact they walk off, they go off to deliver their boss his briefcase, and just the fact they look around themselves and sort of shrug and just put their guns down their shorts. And as we just play on the surf music, and we realise, they're off to see a scene that we saw as like the second shot of the second story of the film, and it's just it's great. I think even now, just the structure of this film is just really. I still like it. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of the Go Watch story. It's weird. It's still like I feel that. Part of me wants to cut it out, but at the same time, I feel that I miss it if it did, because it's got so many those moments within it. Like once it gets going, that I would really miss being in the film.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, it's hard to say, right? In one way, I would want it to be gone just because I feel like it kind of lengthens the movie for no real reason.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you took it out, then. The power of the scene when they walk into the bar as Wallace is talking to Butch, or the power of that scene of having that of showing Wallace who Marcellus Wallace looks like, and that whole standoff moment.
Yeah.
All those things get taken away, and it takes away from the movie because those are also characters that have a bit of charm to it. I mean, obviously. Even when Butch is talking to his girlfriend, you have that feeling that it is a bit annoying, but at the same time, there is a certain it kind of pads up that character also, and Bruce Willis's Butch is very charming in some ways. Like there's a lot, not maybe charming, but like more like it's a very dynamic character to kind of realize who he is, especially when. It's about a father and son story in a sense, in a very indirect way, where it's about the possession of this gold watch that he values a lot, and kind of and it builds that story, which obviously leads to the end. So everything kind of ties together, and while that segment feels the least immersive to watch, it still has a lot of value to it.
Yeah. Definitely so, and I think if we didn't have it, we would also not. Ultimately, the twist of fate that obviously sends our two hitmen off in different directions in their life. I don't think we would have obviously seen the payoff of both of them had continued on that on the track that they were going. So I think it plays into so many different sort of elements, even though it's. Feels like a weird tonal shift just because we were completely new characters, whereas the other stories we've got this familiarity of these characters we've already been introduced to, like when we look at Mia and Vincent's dinner date, we've already been introduced to Vincent, so we've got that connecting thread there. But when it comes to Butch, it's sort of like, well, where do you fit into this story really? It's it's even now, I mean, as I said, I think because this film, I've seen this film so many times, and the fact it's so parodied to hell, I think this is along with Reservoir Dogs, is like one of the Tarantino movies I return to less now, which is going to make it really interesting when we go into our next film, Jackie Brown, because that's obviously the film that I've seen the least out of the Tarantino filmography. I think that and Django Unchained are the two that I've watched the least. So I'm really interested to go back to it with like fresh eyes and see how it plays. So this obviously brings us to the end of tonight's episode. Thank you as always for listening. If you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe button wherever you happen to listen to us. You can follow us at moviesandteapodcast.wordpress.com, and wherever you happen to listen to us, maybe leave a review. Let us know what you think of the show. It always appreciated and helps raise the profile of the show. But Kim, do you want to say where we're going to next?
Well, you kind of just mentioned it before, but we're going to the next movie is 1997's Jackie Brown,
starring the legendary Pam McGrath. So that's going to be exciting for that fact alone. We obviously have Robert Forster. We've got Michael Keaton. In Tarantino's only adaptation, rather than working from an original script, as he adapts Elmer Leonard's Rum Punch to give us Jackie Brown. But we'll obviously talk about that more on our next episode. But until then, thank you for listening. Thanks to my co-host Kim, and we'll be back next time to talk about Jackie Brown. Good night.